Hello. What you're about to watch is a long discussion I had with Ewan Bristow. If you don't know who he is, he's been making really cool Plugdata devices, and even some of them are recreations of paid stuff that we get. And he manages to recreate them within days or weeks and puts them out for free. And so we end up having a discussion about the future of plugins, what the perception is for younger people versus older people, for how much you should pay for plugins, what's seen as expensive, because what he's doing is all free or donation based. So we actually had this conversation a few months back. I've been too busy to upload it and edit it. I was actually going to shorten it and stuff, but I've kept it basically the same length and kept it natural, so it is quite long, but if you're interested, you'll hopefully listen through. All right. First of all, I don't know how you got started doing, because I know you said that you used to make music and you decided to stop making music, but you want to make the tools for it instead. But what
Yeah.
was the reason for that? How did you kind of learn, and what was your motivation to learning about using Plugdata and building these devices?
Yeah, well, I think the biggest inspiration for me, I think that's the right way of saying it. The biggest inspiration for me um, when wanting to get into plugin development really was the fact that, I mean, I'm quite young as well, so there's something to consider there. I'm quite young, and even in only until recently, I've been able to afford plugins like ProQ, like all the big names, because they're really expensive. And we all know firsthand what it's like not to afford these plugins, but especially as a young creator, it can be a little bit daunting looking at £200 worth of a plugin when you don't earn money from music, or you don't earn these insane kind of incomes that other big producers might. And that was one really big impact, which was realizing that people really wanted these free plugins that they could have a direct, quick, I'm a message away, basically, way of asking for these kind of plugins to be made, to add features, to maybe just get some help on understanding, and just sort of not be the community guy, but definitely be embedded in part of the community as someone who is in a very similar position as a lot of other people.
Yeah.
The main thing is another really important thing for me as well was obviously, as you mentioned, my music production. Don't get me wrong, I still love making music, but at the minute it's taken a bit of a nosedive because of this programming. And it just gives me a lot more satisfaction. It just knowing that people are using my plugins, and it helps them creatively. Don't get me wrong, I love like having my music listened to and all that, but so it doesn't have the same kind of impact. And I really wish that more people had that kind of feeling, knowing that your plugin is used when someone's in a creative rut almost.
Yeah, yeah.
Like I'm sure you've been there as well. When you're working on a tune, you're like, oh, there's nothing really clicking, and you see a plugin for free, and you're like, that is the one I'm going to get, and it just sort of helps that. It helps it flow a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
Um, as well as that, to continue, it's a long question.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I started programming early on in secondary school, like really silly Python games, a bit of C++ here and there. Nothing really audio uh, in the audio area, but it was still definitely a big interest in my life. And so, after releasing for a couple of years, it sort of just they sort of met together, and it was a lot easier to transition from programming into music. Than kind of anything else I've really ever done in my life. So it kind of felt really natural, um, which really helped with just being able to push stuff out there, knowing that people would want this, and just not really caring about anything.
Mm-hmm.
And so that really helped.
Yeah, so you had
Um,
the experience already then of coding from a younger age. So when it came to it, you had some knowledge and skill set.
yeah, I think the software that I use, Plugdata, well, Pure Data, obviously, is really, really unique in the fact that it's a node-based programming language. A lot of programming languages you sort of see are text-based,
Mm.
Python, C++, etc., etc. Even audio programming ones like Forced or Super Collider. But Pure Data was really interesting, so it definitely did take a bit. It was a bit of a struggle getting into it, but I think after a while, the learning curve is really, really good.
Mm.
But yeah, it definitely helped that I knew a couple of programming languages beforehand. Not crazily, but I can see the connection.
Well, I think even just having the mind to that kind of mind, I think that's going to help you, isn't it? Because I've tried coding a few times in my life, and it just I don't seem to. People have told me they think I've got the mind for it, but every time I try, I get just so stressed out by it, and I don't get far. I also tried Max a few times. I've done some basic stuff in Max, but again, I think I just prefer the making the music
Mm-hmm.
and doing the sound design. I come up with ideas, but I mean I've got a friend of mine who does coding and he works for, do you know Slate and Ash? They do they're Bristol
Oh.
based as well.
No, it doesn't ring a bell. You have to show
Oh
me.
well they make contact instruments, but
Oh, cool,
he does the coding for them basically.
cool.
And we always talk about what we would do together, you know, and we have loads of ideas together. I have really good ideas. I just wouldn't, I haven't got the brain to sit there and implement it.
Yeah.
So I think
Um,
having that brain is going to help you. But the, yeah, but the fact that it's node based was still a bit of a, quite different to
I'm going
text.
to have to push back on pretty much everything you've just said there because not a pushback, you know what I'm trying to say. I think that anyone can do it. In all honesty, if I can do it, then anyone can because I'm not saying it's easy, but it's a lot easier to get into Pure Data because there's a lot of easy visuals. There's lots of things done for you. It seems intimidating because it's a programming language, but in reality, it's no different to how we're making music already. We've got presets, we've got filters, we've got all these kind of things. But Pure Data just allows you to go a little bit deeper than you would with a DAW. Don't
Yeah.
get me wrong; it's not the same kind of workflow. You're not going to be making a jungle tune. Well, you can, but you wouldn't be as easily making a jungle tune inside of Plugdata than you would in FL, for example.
Mm.
It just gives you that extra control. And I think too many people are intimidated by it, understandably. But I hope that, and this is kind of another goal as well, without sounding too cheesy, it's another goal of my plugins. It's to say, hey, you can make industry standard plugins, in my opinion, industry standard. I think they sound cool. Industry standard plugins for free with the free software that are open source, that look really cool. You can even get cooler with the visuals, which I'm planning on soon as well. I've got some graphic designers working on some cool stuff.
Mm.
It isn't as hard as you think it is.
Okay.
And I think as someone who's kind of looked at the rabbit hole, I've also done some text-based stuff in Juice and some, I dare say, professional audio programming.
Yeah.
The time required to go that deep for me isn't worth it. And I think for a lot of people, even yourself, I just don't think it's worth it. And Pure Data and Plugdata bring it just a little bit closer to the average producer.
Okay.
So I think just as a side note, honestly, I promise you, if you just give it like a couple of hours a day outside of music making, not necessarily treating it like a musical tool, just spending an hour a day or even just half an hour a day, just learning one object or another, slowly those tools will develop and you can have so much more control in your production.
Okay.
Because it's just, there's nothing more to say really. It's just incredible how powerful it is.
How does it? Yeah. How does it compare to Max? Because I've got some experience with Max. The thing that um frustrated me about Max is it's like I understand all the parts of, let's just say, a subtractive synthesizer. I would know if you gave me all the blocks, I would know how to put that together, right? But the
Yeah.
problem with Max is they have all the devices and bits have different weird names that you just wouldn't know unless you look it up. And so you spend so much I spent so much time googling everything, going on the
Mm.
forums just to kind of get some basic stuff going. Is it the same in? in Plugdata or
Yeah,
similar?
so Pure Data was is essentially a branch of Max. I say a branch. They sort of have the same comings and the same origins. They are awfully similar in their workflow, and a lot of the devices are very similar as well. Um, but yes, I completely agree with you. I think the documentation and just the way of programming isn't as clear cut.
Mm.
I think as well, a lot of people are now resorting to AI with programming, which is completely fair, but it's rather difficult for an AI such as ChatGPT, who is a text-based language generator.
Yeah,
Well, text, I'm trying to say text-based, blah blah blah, to figure out where these nodes are going, and you can't really ask it help, and it's really hard to explain to people as well, like asking them because as mentioned, it's node based, so there are so many paths for these data points to go. It's quite difficult to explain to someone or ask someone, or even just look online. It's quite difficult not to just take from a template and chuck it in and modify. So I can see your confusion there. Not confusion, but I can see why you might have struggled there.
yeah,
Um, but I think there is definitely a lack of there's a lack of comfortable documentation. I know a lot of people, especially my age, who will resort to going to YouTube videos and
yeah,
watching tutorials on these kind of things, which is great if that's how you want to learn, but there's not much of that for Pure Data and Plugdata. There's definitely enough, but for spectral processing, for example, there was a lot of rabbit holes I had to go down,
mm.
and a lot of papers I had to read, even the Capstral stuff. That was a challenge. And I can see why a lot of people would be put off by it, but in the next coming years, me and a couple of other creators are working on like a big ball of just information spread out over these kind of videos. So it should get better, and it will only
Yeah,
get better in the
yeah,
next coming
definitely.
years.
I guess once people start clocking onto it more, because
Mm.
it's not, I guess I only came across it this year. I feel like would have been like mixed between yours and Nasco's stuff. I think I
Yeah,
don't think
Nasco is
I've heard
doing
of
some really great stuff for the community. He's doing some
yeah.
really cool stuff.
I don't think I'd heard of Plug Data before that. I don't think. Um, so it's quite new to me, and I feel like people are maybe it's something that people are more and more discovering. Maybe.
Yeah, definitely. I think, well, Pure Data has been around for a long time, but I think only recently creators such as Nasco and myself, some other creators I can't name off the top of my head, we're trying to create these plugins which you can open in a DAW, um, which wasn't possible before with normal Pure Data. I say normal, vanilla Pure Data.
Yeah.
Um, and obviously, as you mentioned, it's only recently that Timothy, the main dev behind Plugdata, has made it available for us to open PD and use libpd in
Mm.
a DAW, which is amazing.
Yeah.
And I think it's just, I think, as mentioned earlier, it can only get better. More and
Yeah.
more devices are coming out. More and more people are going to start seeing this. And hopefully it starts to become a trend that more and more people realize that it isn't as difficult as they might think it is.
Mm.
And more and more people start making devices, and then it becomes a thing like Contact, where everyone has Plugdata, everyone has these devices that you can open, everyone sort of has, a nice little tight knit community, where you can all share these devices and share this information, and hopefully upgrade the documentation.
Yeah. Do you think we're kind of in a way been we're at the birth of it at the moment? It's only going to get bigger.
Definitely, I think 100%. I think the only natural progression that I can see right now is that plug data is something, as mentioned, that everyone has on their computers. Um, when it becomes stable and when it is backed up by more people, when the main developer is more supported, go support him. When he's amazing. When he updates and makes it as stable as possible, and pretty much every request has been filled in, I think we're good, and we've got this amazing toolkit that is essentially going to be like, as you mentioned earlier, a contact library, but just so much more in depth
Yes.
and
Yeah.
accessible and just a bit more comfortable to use. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I guess this sort of feeds into the discussion of what we think the future of software, music software is. Um, So maybe we should just chat about that now,
Yeah, sound.
because we were talking in the Discord, a few of us in your Discord, and it started because of I did a video on Ghost, that new FM synth,
Oh
and
yeah,
it's everyone was complaining about the price because it's £200.
I remember this. Yeah, yeah,
Well,
yeah,
maybe is it £200 or is it $200? But whatever, it's around that price basically,
yeah.
and everyone's kicking off. And I was, although at first at first I was defending the price, but now I do see like, yeah, it could have been. I feel like maybe 100 to 150 would have been probably a wiser choice. He's actually now building a rent to own system for it, so there's
Cool.
that now. But anyway, so I was just kind of shocked because serum, current, pigments, whatever, right? All the big ones that are really fully featured and rich, which Ghost also is. And the thing is, Ghost is actually doing some really interesting stuff and that's different.
Yeah.
Um, I was just like, well, that is the price range of that kind of synth. That's what I'm used to. That's what it's always been like. Um, but then people were like, well, okay, what about Vital? That's free. Um,
Yeah.
we got into the discussion about people like yourself who are making these devices and you're giving them away for free. You got a couple that paid for, but
Mm.
they're cheap. And like
Mm.
you're just like churning them out really quickly, and it's just like, for example, it's like a free version of stuff like that costs a lot of money. Uh,
Synaptic Morph, which is around about 170 euros, I think it is, off the top of my
yeah,
head. Don't quote me on that, but yeah,
yeah, it's
definitely.
expensive. I mean, I own it as well. I mean, I
Mm.
bought two, and then three came out recently, which I bought as well.
Mm.
Uh, and they've got more complex stuff to them, but the basic basis of it you've just created really quickly. And it sounds really nice.
Thank you
So
very
just
much.
like the kind of just it just gets me thinking. I'm like, okay, and I was trying to work out, is there like a, because I'm in my late 30s. I started doing this about 20 years ago, so things were very different then.
Mm.
And when I was younger, I would torrent stuff because I didn't have money. I'd buy some stuff,
Sick.
but now I work professionally and I buy stuff, right?
Mhm.
Um, but for me, £200 for like a fully fledged synthesizer that does, that it's like that to me wasn't crazy. Whereas it seems like there seems to be a lot of people who think that's really high and crazy. And I guess I was shocked by that, but then it kind of got me thinking about all of this. So and you were chipping in on the conversation as well. So I mean, what's your kind of insight on where things are? So like, do you think that more and more people are going to figure out how to create their own stuff and then give them away for cheap or free, or is it just going to continue to be, there's going to be products that are high-end products by big companies or whatever who are going to continue, people are going to buy that stuff, but then there's also people that are not going to buy that stuff, but they're going to just do the free stuff and stuff like that. I mean,
Mm.
what do you think about that?
I think it could go two ways because as much as I would love every person to have the ability to create their own plugin, I think it does have the ability to completely trump, like you mentioned, those like Serum, Massive, Fab Filter, all of these really incredible, well-developed plugins. I'm not dissing any plugin here. I want to make that very clear. I'm
Mm,
not dissing on any kind of plugin developers, and I hope that I'm not seen, and other creators like me aren't seen as the kids that are going to try and rile up the industry and sort of try and push it all down. I hope we're not seen like that.
no.
Um, but as much as I'd love everyone to have the ability to create their own plugin easily accessible within software like Plugdata, I do think it would start. It could either pull those prices down and sort of bring them to a nice equilibrium, or it could push it apart more. And so, for example, if I released a serum clone, I guess you could call it, if I released a serum clone for free, would it bump the price up of serum because it's professional and actually made with C++ and all these other, I'm not exactly sure all of the development, but it's
Yeah.
professionally made. And there's a big distance between my bodge sort of sellotape together version. Or would it bring them closer together because now my cheap or free version does 90% of what Vital does, of what
So,
Serum does. Sorry, Serum, yeah. Does what 90% of Serum does. Would it sort of bring those two together? I'm not sure. I hope that there's I hope that plugin manufacturers sort of take this as a good thing to let them know that plugins need to be more interesting.
yep.
As mentioned in the conversation, I'm pretty sure I've seen a couple of things now recently, especially with a couple of videos online by some very, I think Weaver Beats. He did a video on about plugins are dead. Everyone's got an analog compressor. Everyone's got these basics. We really don't need another emulation of these kind of hardware effects. And in a way, I kind of agree. I think that everyone has the basics now. You really don't need to pay FabFilter, for Serum, for all of these things, if you just want to put that little bit more time in. But again, that's bumping up these prices more because these companies need to pay their programmers. These companies need to pay their graphic designers. They've got bills to pay.
Yeah.
And I understand that, but it just pumps up the price even more of those plugins, and it doesn't really end well because no one's really happy. But I, of all people, shouldn't really be saying any of this in all honesty because I'm no professional in any of these areas. I have no idea what it could look like in the next couple of years if Plugdata does take off and almost everyone has it on their computer and like we're all able to make these really interesting effects. I have no idea what the landscape could look like, but I really hope it does shake it up a little bit and make things more interesting.
Yes.
And at the end of it, I hope everyone just learns a little bit more. I think that's the biggest thing. I hope that makes sense, and I hope I'm not coming off too offensively to the big guys.
I don't think you are at all. No, 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 not at all. I don't think that's the case. I think you're right. I agree with that. Like, I think if anything, the the big companies or the big players or whatever, I think if they're smart, they would take notice of this sort of stuff and what's going on.
100%.
Because like I mentioned to you, like I'm going to start working for Arturia as part of
Mm.
the sound design and audio.
Congratulations, by the way.
Yes, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm going to be. I plan to have this discussion when I'm there about people like you and the sort of people and like the kind of the fact that you can knock up a kind of simplified version of Morph that sounds amazing, like real quick, versus the almost £200 one that's out there, etc. You know, things like that. And also like I think spectral effects are a really interesting world that's being really explored at the moment. And I feel like there's a lot of ground to be trodden still.
100%. I've got so many projects in the works. It's insane.
Yeah, because I mean, the reason why I came across your stuff was because I think it was Chameleon X that came up. I don't know, maybe because I've had an interest in the spectral stuff in the last year, so I've just been like, because it's and it's like in the last year I feel like it's really ramped up with people making little devices or whatever and things coming about, and so I've been taking a real interest in it. And even though I don't make I don't have an interest in making color base or what's the other one, Botanica, is it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, like that where the spectral stuff's being used a lot, and people are. I'm like following that world because I'm finding it interesting and looking at what these people are using to make those sounds. But I don't have an interest in making it itself, but I have an interest in the tools they're using and using them in other ways.
Yeah, of course.
So I've just
Yeah.
had a natural interest in it, and it feels like there's I've kind of lost my point now. It feels like there's so much ground to be covered with this still, and I feel like if you're a bigger company or is something you should be taking note of, because I feel like it's an area it's a sonic area that's really interesting.
Yeah, I think the point that I'm getting out of it, at least, is that these big plugin companies need to hurry up, and that, bear with me, let me cook, because I think not necessarily hurry up. Oh, what's the right way of saying it without sounding like an absolute dick? um, it's really similar to the whole AI conversation that's been going on for the past year or so. AI is going to take our jobs. AI is going to take this, and it's getting more and more advanced by the day. There's no escaping it. I've been able to create really, really basic super collider demos, for example, which is really fun to work with. Seeing how it processes stuff that I've been doing, I'm learning and trying to still. It's really a really good tool to help with. Just as an example, right? And after a while, these things are going to catch up really fast. And Plugdata, and me and Nasco and some other developers, I can kind of see us being a little bit like that. We're a little bit quicker. We're a little bit bodged together. We aren't perfect. We're cheap and we're easily accessible. And it's going to rile up stuff. It's going to really I don't know what the right way of saying it. I hope this is coming across right. Is this making any sense?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Like,
you kind of want to just shake things up a bit.
no, I don't want to. I don't want to be seen, but I really don't support AIR, and I really don't support it. But sometimes it is generally really good at teaching and helping. But I really want to not support it, and so by my own point, I really shouldn't be supporting myself, because I think I know I have annoyed a couple of creators by saying that most of the plugins that I develop are free for a reason, because they should be free.
Right.
And that plugins shouldn't cost excessive amounts. We've got to a point now where plugins are costing upwards of £300, £400 for stuff that I can remake in a week or so in Plugdata.
Okay.
And I can see how that might sound like a massive punch in the face to a lot of companies who need to feed families, who need to keep all these people up. And I can see how it can sound like that.
I mean, I see. Yes, you're kind of thinking because you can easily build some of this stuff. So you're saying to that it feels weird that it costs so much. This being priced so high.
Yeah, and I'm not digging. Like I said, I'm not digging. I'm not saying, oh, it shouldn't be this, because there's effort gone into it. There is clear 100% effort, and I fucking appreciate all of it. ProQ wouldn't be where it is without ProQ3. Do you know what I mean? Like that, just all of the people behind it and that have made it, and all the effort that's gone into it is clear. But like the Morph, for example, I can see how the effort that's gone into it. But like I said, it took me a couple of weeks. Granted, it was made in Plugdata, and I can see why most people might not say it's a real plugin because it's made with Plugdata, but it's no different from installing a library from a Juice demo, for example, and using that as the basis of your plugin. I know a lot of creators who take Python programming, for example, is a really clear one. You import a library and you use it. And it's so common nowadays. It's exactly the same as Plugdata. So I don't really see why it should cost so much.
Yeah.
But then again, to counter my own argument, I can see the effort that's put in. So effort should 100% be compensated.
Yeah.
Which is why my stuff is free.
Thing is, your thing is you're spending your time, right? And that is basically, it's as if you're working for a company and they're paying you an hourly wage, right? So
yeah, I've put
that's
too many
kind
hours
of
into
why
it.
that's why it costs that, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, no, totally.
So I don't know. I mean,
I just think as well, just very quickly, just to butt in, sorry, just thinking about the end user. Are they going to want to spend £200 on a nicely polished stuff that's got effort in that they've never seen that effort before, or would they rather download Plugdata, download the patch, load it in for free?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. But
Which
they,
is which
I guess both ways are just as valid as each other. There's no right or
100%.
wrong. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I can see how there could be a little bit of a battle between the two. And I
Mhm.
hope I don't want it to come to that, which is why it's a little bit tricky for me releasing these plugins. Um,
But let's just say something like pigments or current, for example. Like they're quite complex. They've got a
I
granular
haven't
engine, they've got a noise engine. Have you not used those or looked at
I
those?
haven't pigments.
Arterial one.
I
Um,
don't think I have. I'll have to have a look at it after this.
no, that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. But anyway, they're essentially. I mean, imagine if you had serum, but then on top of that, you have a granular engine, two noise engines, and a third oscillator, plus more advanced effects and modulate. I don't know, stuff like that. So it's the same with current. Current's similar to that as well. I mean, there's. I feel like it would be quite difficult for you to just put something like that together real quick in Plugdata.
Pigments. Let's have a look. Three oscillators, engine sample, utility, noise, sub-osc.
Oh, it's got a sample engine as well. I forgot about that. Yeah. Um,
Well, just looking at it, just looking at that, the idea is you could. Again, I got to think about my words carefully. Everything that you've just described there, totally doable Plugdata, totally doable.
oh yeah. Oh, I'm not
Um,
saying you can't do it. I'm just saying it would. Yeah, yeah. It's just like it would be. It would probably take you quite a long time to get put something like that together, which would be worth spending money on as a someone purchasing it because you spent a lot of time on it. Do you know what I mean?
yeah, I get that.
But versus like the plugins you've made much more like they're like singular things, singular ideas. Whereas like a fully fledged synthesizer with all these different engines and stuff, and all the modulation options and all the effects, that is more
Mm.
time consuming to create. So I guess if you did do something like that, it probably would take a while, right? So I don't think anyone would feel it was wrong of you to ask for money for your time on that.
No, totally. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, 100%. But I just have to counter that with as a music producer myself. I don't use those kind of insane modulation effects or those kind of insane routing effects, and the stuff that would take a lot of time. I know a lot of people who are in the same boat as well. I'm in a university full of music producers, right? So it's quite easy to test and see these things. Um, and a lot of the time, the stuff that they're asking for and the stuff that I've released that I've asked for isn't modulation. It's stuff, for example, in my latest one, Blasphemy, which is random based. It's all chance based. It's all,
Mhm.
which is super easy to do. Just a random and a parameter, and you can change the percentage. It took time, but it didn't take as much time as it would do. And I don't think there's.
I think it seemed like it took you like a couple of days. I don't know. It didn't seem. You seemed like you knocked it up really quickly.
Yes, well, there's a timeline you can see on my Twitter of me just working on, but I work on it like I don't think there's been a day for like a couple of months that I haven't opened Plugdata and at least done one thing.
Mm.
So I can guess, I guess there's a lot of time that is put into it, 100%. But again, the stuff is sort of coming up with the idea now. There's no point in trying to Vital, like you mentioned earlier on, Vital, for example, that's a free version of Serum. I don't really need to make another Serum. I don't need to make another Vital. I don't need to waste my time there. Whereas I haven't seen a really good Morph plugin for free.
Hmm.
Um, or like the Amen slicer, there's like ones that are quite cheap, but not ones that do what I do. Like the Spectral Gate, for example, I really wanted that super simple to cook up and just put straight in. I don't see that often. So it was, there's
That is what's good about your stuff, actually, is that they are very much like it. I want this sound, and it's going to just do it real quick. And You
which
just
is
mess
yeah,
around with the parameters and you're having fun with it. Yeah.
the fun of it. Perfect. I'm glad you said that. Thank you very much. That's ticked a box for me. I've
Yeah.
given someone fun. That's the whole point of it, right? Whereas I think, like mentioned earlier, the modulation effects, all these kind of things, don't get me wrong, they can be fun, but they can also be really tedious. And a lot of people just want to chuck something on an effect
Hmm.
or chuck a sound inside of something and just get something weird back.
Yeah.
Maybe dial in the controls a little bit,
Yeah.
which is what I mentioned. There's no real need for me to create another serum. Vital kind of already does that.
Yeah.
Um,
That's
that's
true.
a, do you know what I mean? So that there's yeah.
Yeah, it's funny.
I hope that makes sense.
I always forget because I'm very much like I'm a sound designer and I'm always like I go very deep with synthesis and stuff like that. So I always forget that some people don't have that knowledge and don't really care to know about it. They just want to quickly get going and just throw some things in play, you know. So
Totally.
do forget that.
Totally. But then there's also the added benefit of Plugdata being you can open it up, you can download one of my patches and see exactly how it works from 0 to 100. You can see absolutely everything. And if you've got any questions, I'm a DM away. And I make
Mm.
that very clear, which is amazing for I've had multiple people want custom versions or like cool ideas or weird ideas. And it's great. So there's that extra benefit of having fun with it. Like I said earlier, yeah, it's not perfect. Yeah, it's sellotape together with duct tape, but it has that kind of fun aspect that you feel like you could control if you wanted to, but in a different way.
Yeah.
Um,
And the Discord community is really useful as well, isn't it? Because you just get to chat with people about it, get ideas really quickly, get feedback.
Totally, that's a really really big help. I actually had an interview yesterday with my university about it, and they said that they asked one of the big things was, "What about your Discord? What's going on there?" It's just great having a couple hundred people. You can just say, "What do you want?" and they can just give it straight to you instead of
Yeah.
having to do all this kind of complicated research and be all corporate and like just
Yeah.
have a bit of fun and just ask people, what about this? Try this, let me know. And I've got so many projects that have got these ideas in. I've got projects with comments that I've actually written up in the project saying, this is from this person that I need to then go back and speak to and ask about these ideas. I've got quite a few. Um, and they're all just ready to go out. But it's just so much better than having to compete with another analog compressor, which I guess, again, no diss, but
Yeah, we don't need
I
any
don't
more.
I don't know anyone that uses any. So
Mhm.
it's a bit, I feel like maybe this could help people steer their synthesis in the right direction, spending a little more time with like EB Morph. It was a really specific thing that does one thing decently. It does it well enough, and
Mm.
maybe making it a little bit cheaper. Hopefully, plugin companies can maybe take something from this. If they don't want to do that, then that's fair. They know a lot more than me. But that's kind of the thing that I feel like a lot more people want,
Mm.
at least from my perspective, which is again in a university full of weird electronic music producers who just want the latest sounds that they can tell their mates and release and
Exactly.
a bit
Yeah.
of fun with. So yeah,
A few moments later.
Yeah, I think that's another thing is you're currently at uni and how old are you?
I'm 20.
Yeah, exactly. So you're super young still. You're at uni, you're around a bunch of some people similar age. And it's like um I'm kind of interested in the perspective of people like you and people your age range who are just maybe been you're still in the sort of early stages of making music and figuring out what you want to do. You haven't got to that stage where if it's to become a profession, you're you got to figure that out and things because things can get stressful and you kind of realize, oh, it's quite hard to make money sometimes, especially if you're just trying to be like a DJ producer or something, you know. You
I'm
quite
dreading it.
you quite quick yeah, you quite quickly realize it's not easy, especially these days. Because I spent my 20s pursuing being a DJ producer, and I had various levels of success, but it never really got to where I needed it to be for it to be a full-time career.
Yeah,
So I started getting into sample packs and stuff, and then basically then just fell out of love with all that and got into other areas of sound. So, but it took me, yeah, it took me a while to get to that point, you know, where I was actually making good money.
Hmm.
So I'm just wondering what, like, do you feel like then around you, the kind of general feeling is maybe we don't, you know, you haven't got, none of you have got like jobs yet. So you just sort of got your student loans or whatever, maybe some part-time job. You don't have a ton of money. You're just spending all your money on booze. Maybe, maybe not.
Not
And
me, no,
yeah,
really not. It's all going on rent, mate. Honestly, I'm fucking
it's funny. I mean,
rent and headphones.
yeah, it's funny because I live in Bristol as well, by the way. But
Oh, do you?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh, fucking
So
fire! Sound.
when I moved to Bristol 15 years ago, I got a shared flat in St Paul's, and my rent was 175 a month.
Fuck right off. You're shitting me. Are you
Yeah,
serious?
yeah,
I'm paying 910 a month.
exactly. Yeah, it's mental, isn't it?
You
Like things have
lucky
just
bastard.
things have gone up so much now.
Fuck.
I remember
Wow.
around so maybe around like 8 years ago, something like that, really started to see things ramping up, prices ramping up, and people are cotting on more and more about how good Bristol is and coming here. And but yeah, so it's funny how things have changed.
Shit and heck. That's really put it in perspective. God, yeah, I'm looking for a cheaper two bed next year, but fucking
Yeah, yes, mad as a student to be paying £900 a month. It just seems mad, doesn't it?
I've got a job. I'm actually working at Sainsbury's down at Winterstoke, other side of Bristol for me.
Yeah,
Um, Sort of down near the stadium. That pays my rent and everything from my Plugdata stuff pays for everything else.
yeah,
So all
right.
my food, all the other stuff. It work pretty is literally like this month. I got my paycheck last night. It's barely paying, but we get there. We
Yeah,
get
that's
there. We'll
yeah,
figure it out.
that's the way it is, sadly. But I mean, it's interesting because all the stuff you're doing now is it's amazing what you're doing already at your age, I think. Um, and
I
so
appreciate that. Thank you.
you've already built a really cool community on Discord, and making a bit of an impact in that world. So I think it's looking good, you know. If you'll just carry on because you enjoy it, and hopefully it will go on to all sorts of things. And actually, like just on a separate thing, do you have any like? Are you thinking like about where this will go long term, or are you more just in it at the moment, just doing what feels good and feels right, and then if and you'll just see where the wind blows you, I guess.
Yeah, basically, I've got this year and then next year of uni, which I can sort of pay for, kind of, and I'm just trying to figure that out. If this goes well and goes smoothly and nothing really goes too crazy, um, the plan is kind of have something in this area, which hopefully uni will sort of connect me with people. It's connected me with so many people already,
Yeah,
and enough people to say, "Oh, he does this. This is really handy. Let's get him on. Let's get him on the team." Um, Hopefully that happens.
yeah.
I'm not really looking for anything right now. Just because it would be too much work, in all
No,
honesty.
yeah.
My job at Sainsbury's, I can put an earphone in and just do it. So it's
Mm.
kind of good there. It's not fun, but it does it. But yeah, just sort of riding the waves on it, really. Like I said, I'm a 20-year-old idiot, throwing stuff at the wall, seeing what sticks.
Yeah.
And so far, this Plugdata stuff is doing really well. I've got some really cool side projects as well, like I mentioned, with Super Collider, with some weird generative visuals, not as commercial and not as aimed towards producers, more aimed for the um, just people who want to see some interesting stuff, but nothing really too out there in terms of like under the business category, if that makes
No,
sense.
no, no, no.
Um,
But you shouldn't
and
really be worrying about that too much now anyway. You know, I think what you're doing is good enough and it will probably lead to many things, as you said. And the
I
network,
appreciate it.
you know.
That's the plan, hopefully. But yeah, I think I definitely need to up my skills in other areas because, as mentioned earlier on in the talk, Plugdata isn't, as of now, seen as a professional programming environment, at least to many people,
Yeah.
and especially many businesses. So I can see why I'm working on a granular Pi project based on Raspberry Pi, which uses Plugdata. Um, and you can sort of feel the unprofessionalism, even though it's done by only me, but you can definitely feel the unprofessionalism
Yeah.
as it is right now in the software. Yeah, hopefully with some more skills, some more people seeing the plugins and seeing the portfolio of stuff.
Yeah.
Hopefully it should take off, but I'm not really too fussed about it right now. Like I said, I go to my job at Sainsbury's, I earn enough there, I earn enough with Plugdata. So thankful for everyone for donating. Honestly, like I said, it keeps me fed, which is a great. And in all honesty, right now I don't need anything more than that. Which is going to go off on a bit of a tangent, but which is why, again, I understand why some plugin developers and some plugin companies would charge 200, 300, even more sometimes for their plugins and like bundles of things. And I can see it, I can get it, especially if they're even just a little bit more older than me and have an actual life and families to provide for. Right now, I'm going to take advantage of the fact that I'm, as mentioned, a 20-year-old idiot throwing stuff at the wall, living in uni with a job on the side, figuring stuff out. I'm going to mess up a couple of times. I've already pissed a couple of people off, apparently, by saying the things I've just said to you. But at the minute, I'm not really too fussed because, like I said, I'm doing good for a lot of people, evidently. And I'm so appreciative of everyone who said, even just said thank you or commented or just the little things, or even just liked or downloaded. So I'm doing something right for a lot of people. So we'll see where it goes.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the right way to do it. And I think while you're at uni and just having fun with stuff, the fact that I think it basically it's something that will pay off. The fact that you're just getting attention, you're getting things out there, just giving them away for free and just having fun with it. I think that doesn't matter for you right now because you're not older where you kind of really got to have a proper income and support yourself. You're not relying on uni anymore and all the rest of it. So like doing this right now will pay off in the future because you're creating just giving them away for free is getting people interested, and also the devices. I feel like they shouldn't be free. Do you know what I mean? They should because they're
I
worth.
appreciate it.
You
But
know what I
I've
mean?
had a lot of people say that exact same thing. Even on EB Blasphemy, the latest one, I've had people say you should charge for these because genuinely, I'm like, I had another comment separately saying that they've had like over 40 hours of usage on EB Resonator, which is insane to me. Like that's just fucking mental. Something that I cooked up in about 2 or so weeks, and then obviously packaged and did the video. It took me about a month in total. Has gotten that many people interested. And it if there's no reason for me to stop right now. Um, yeah, that's about it, really. I completely agree with everything you said, and I appreciate that very much. Thank you very much.
No problem. Yeah, it's exciting stuff.
Yeah,
I just as I mentioned earlier, I'm just enjoying watching from afar uh what's kind of going on and as someone who's a bit older and I've just seen how things have changed just with YouTube. Like when I started out, wasn't YouTube tutorials for anything, there wasn't that
exactly.
sort of there just wasn't that sort of community and stuff. Like it was very much like I was trying to figure it all out on my own. I didn't even have a ton of friends or really any friends who were making music at the time. It was and like I was spending like £40 on uh, a CD sample pack. Do you know what I mean? That it gets sent to you and you load it
So
up.
cool.
It's just so funny and now it's like you just pay Splice £10 a month for everything, and then you just get so many YouTubers and so much information. There's always a video on what you want to learn or what you need to know.
Mm-hmm.
So like these days, it's just so much more accessible, and I feel like I'm seeing younger people, creating really professional, interesting, cool sounding stuff really quickly and really early. And I'm like, God, I was not making stuff sound that good when I was that age because it was just different then.
I think it's a weird one because there is definitely a lot of stuff on YouTube, which is like the preferred way of my generation's information intake, right? It's from taking it from someone who's planned out the video, made it nice and professional, and sort of spoon fed it to them in a nice way, which is totally okay. Um, but I think that, as you mentioned, a lot of these things, like a lot of these concepts and a lot of the things that YouTubers are covering, were made by, and I hate to categorize you, older people such as yourself, who have made these
Old
things,
people.
and sort of so old
Boomers.
people, yes, boomers. No, just people. Like you said, in your mid 30s, and just people older as well, with that little bit more knowledge that is then sort of being packaged up differently and pushed to different people. I've had some people say to me that this is just Plugdata. This is just using someone else's basis for a plugin, and you're packaging it. Why are you charging for it? Which has definitely influenced the way that I'm releasing my stuff, and I'm putting out stuff for free.
Mm.
But in a sense as well, earlier on, like I said, I managed to piss someone off who I won't name, who does develop plugins. There was a weird. Bear with me. Let me think about how to say this. As mentioned earlier in the conversation, me loading up a sub patch inside a PD or an object in PD is no different to you using a collider, super collider demonstration, for example, or I don't really know what the equivalent would be for like a sine wave inside of the Juice framework, but just using like a demo piece of code, or even just like a, what are they called? What's the right term when you like bring something from a library?
I'm not sure. I know what you're trying to say though. It's like kind of a pre-made
Yeah,
code.
you don't need to like send it a signal from 0 to 1 and then use the sine of that multiplied by pi over 2 or whatever it is. I can't exactly remember off the top of my head. To create a sine wave, we just use sin.ar or something to create that sine wave. It's no different from me doing that. And so I think the argument that, oh, this isn't a real thing, or like blah blah blah, and I think that's an interesting one to make. But then again, these objects were made by people who are definitely wiser, probably quite a bit older than me. We're talking 20, 30 years older than me.
Mm.
And so in a sense, yes, I'm repackaging their work, but so are they.
Mm.
So as you mentioned with the splice thing, like as you mentioned, like the whole, that sort of like idea and the whole like shipping out CDs is really interesting. But now younger people have taken the splice approach. Whoever the inventor of splice is probably had a similar thought, like, oh, I'm just taking these older people's ideas and packaging them up separately. Oh God, I feel really guilty. There's a weird one because it sort of feels like a cycle. I hope this is making some kind of sense. I'm just sort of yapping, but I hope you can see my point here. There's a weird cycle of even in music production as well. These people will make something like PD, and will reuse it in a certain interesting way that was never really done before. And yet some people will get really, really pressed about it. And I just think that's really interesting. What are your opinions, actually? I know you've been looking at it on the side. What are your opinions on this whole thing? How do you think it could impact? I'm quite interested, as someone who's going into work for Arturia. I think that could be a really interesting perspective from you.
Yeah.
Flip the conversation. Hit me.
Yeah, I'm I've basically I feel like you're the reason why something is costing money is because there's someone who's put their time and knowledge into making it, you know?
Yeah.
And I just it's as simple as that, really. Um, I think that if you were a bit older and you're out of uni and you've got these skills and this ability to create plugins, um, I feel like you wouldn't be doing them for free, or you are now because you're in your position you're in, but in the future you'll be like, right, okay, now I can have a bit of a career going here, so I can actually be creating stuff and people pay for them, whether it's a small or big price, whatever, doesn't matter. But like, I think that will change your perspective probably. I don't think you might do some free stuff, but like I think like just you can't really do that forever unless you are making money elsewhere and you're happy with how what you're doing with your time in making that money. And then on the
Yeah.
side, you continue to make little devices for free. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there's like that bit of it. And but in terms of the in terms of I guess what the future is and what it should be like should because like for example minimal audio, are you familiar with minimal audio stuff like their riff
I am.
distortion and all their plugins and current and stuff?
Yeah, yeah.
I'm quite active in their Discord and I do beta testing for current and stuff as well.
Cool.
uh, and I absolutely when they as soon as that synth came out I bought it and I use it like constantly. It's basically my go-to now and I love all of their effects. So um I know that they use Juice to build their stuff. Um, but their plugins look amazing, first of all. So this is actually this is a thing. So there's a thing about like the UI is actually quite an important element that makes something look and feel expensive. Do you know what
Mm-hmm.
I mean?
Yes.
So under the hood, as someone like you with your knowledge of how something's made, you may look at something and that looks the UI is amazing. It looks really flashy and it looks expensive. It looks professional, all the rest of it. And it probably sounds good, all the rest of it. But you know that under the hood, you can make something like that in Plugdata quite easily, but with a basic UI. Yeah, I mean,
Yes.
whatever. So yeah, maybe that's what your perspective is a bit. So,
100%. The
yeah.
second you look past, I mean, I completely agree with you, but with all due respect, we're audio programmers. We make stuff to listen to.
Mm,
Um, and our end users, yeah, they can look at the flashy lights. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. But at the end of the day, the stuff that comes out of it is the audio.
mm.
There's a big reason why my free stuff looks like it is because it's made in Plugdata. It doesn't exactly look the prettiest. I do my best to make it look nice, but it doesn't have these flashy bubbles or like these really time consuming like graphics that I've seen with like what's the plugin? Not Portal. It's not that's the one with the
Yeah, with the XY,
thermal
yeah, thermal and
portal.
portal. They're both like the similar. They've got that circle with, and you move the thing
Yeah,
around XY pad.
like visuals like that. I can understand the appeal of it. And there's one as well, which is like a black like orb of like tar, and like every piece of audio you send through it gets like messed around in the actual plugin itself, which is really cool. But how much time did that take that you could have spent on the DSP?
But I think this is this is a thing, and I've only just remembered this. This is a thought I've had in recent times when thinking about this stuff. Um, it feels like we're in a time where people are just there's a lot of stuff that a lot of people are making plugins that are the same thing that already exists 100 times already.
Yep.
Or they might have some differences, and that depends. Like there's some companies that do some really good stuff, and others that here's another compressor, here's another delay, but there's not. I've already got 10 delays, but
Yep.
but the thing that so it's like what can win people over to purchasing your products is your branding and your visual branding basically,
Mhm.
and then including your UIs. And it's almost like I don't know this as a fact, but I feel like this would be a business move if you're thinking, right, I want to start a plugin company. If I was to start a plugin company, whether or not I'm doing anything unique with what plugins I'm making, I would make sure that the branding and the UI is really flashy and nice because that looks and feels expensive. And I feel like that is a big part of where plugins have been recently, is this sort of looking good. What makes you think sounds good? Do you know what I mean? The look of it makes you feel like it's something special and crazy or whatever.
I think I hate it. I sorry, that was quite a. I think that just sums up my viewpoint on that. I think we're going down the route. Not we're going down the route. I think we're taking inspiration from the TikTokification of everything.
Hmm.
Plugin developers and that kind of area is, at least in my opinion, um, in my opinion, the most unique sounding plugins that I know my friends and I used to use day to day were the ones that looked horrible. DT Block Effects, for example. No offense, DT Block Effects. I love the plugin, but have you ever seen that one?
DT block effects. I don't think I have.
It's quite possibly the most powerful plugin I have ever seen land on the face of this planet, and it looks like shit. And
What's it called? DT.
DTBLKFX. Imanu showed it to me in a server a long time ago, and it's just been amazing. Like honestly, the effects just are incredible. It's a spectral processing unit,
Oh,
and the effects I'm still looking at and like trying to recreate to this day. Um, and it looks
heard of this
like
one.
ass. I think they've done like a redesign of it recently. Let me DTBLKFX. Yeah,
Yeah, I've got it here. Yeah, so it's yeah. So it's just really looks. It looks like it was made on Windows 95. You know.
but yeah, like it doesn't. In reality, if you're an audio, if you're well, if you're going to prefer looks over the sound that an audio-based plugin gives you, I don't know. There's something
But
that doesn't really sit
that's the
right.
business, isn't? Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, but like it feels like that is maybe like the modern business model at the moment. You know. I mean, there also are like obviously you can also do something that is actually really good sounding and really good unique tool. Also looks good, obviously. But
Mm.
I feel like there was one recently that came out. It's by the people that made that cube synthesizer, that vector synthesizer. Called it's an effect called um. Let me quickly look it up.
Yeah, no worries.
Uh, let me type in cube and then synth. So Lunacy Audio, that's it. Yeah. So what was the products? Beam, that's it. Beam by Lunacy Audio.
Have a
So
look. There
it's
with. Oh yeah, the Botanica one I've been seeing on my posts for about a million years. Yeah,
so that is
yeah.
basically just it's essentially a reverb, um, but it's also got granular effect on it as well. So it's got like a kind of I guess there's a granular delay type thing plus reverbs.
Mhm.
Um, and it seemed that is not, in my opinion, isn't really doing anything new. Like there's a similar plugin by Arturia that came out a couple of years ago called Fragments.
Mhm.
That you could get similar stuff out, or you could like use that plus one of your reverbs.
Yeah.
This is just so I this again this is an example of something that I just feel like isn't really doing anything, but it's got this fancy UI all about the nodes, and you're like connecting the different nodes, and they all visually connect with the like the kind of electricity thing that beams through.
Yeah,
And
but
it's like that's a perfect example for me of like something that's not really doing anything new, but it's like they've got this whole fancy UI thing that makes you kind of go, "Oh, it's like this shiny thing that's going to do something cool." And it's not like it's a bad effect either. It's just that it's not doing anything interesting, in my opinion, that hasn't already been done. And it's £100, I guess, as well. That or dollars, $100, which is and it's just an effect.
is it literally just like granular reverb and delay?
Yes, essentially, it's got you can filter. It's got a filter on it as well, but what doesn't have a filter? Um, and it has some modulation options. But yeah, it's not particularly unique or interesting, but the UI is really fancy, so it gives you this impression that it is kind of, it gives you this like wow effect, you know?
I think it looks stunning. Just for the record, it looks amazing. I think that looks really, really cool. Beam looks awesome. Does it sound good?
Yeah, it doesn't sound bad.
But
Like my
in that
point,
case, what if their point is to make audio plugins that sound? Maybe this isn't their point, which is perfectly okay. If their kind of whole thing is making interesting audio effects, then it doesn't really sound like they're in it for the long run in this plugin. Like it kind of seems like if they're appealing more visually, and if I feel like they might know this as well, considering that you've just told me and looking at it, it kind of does look like it. If this is kind of their goal, then are they really in it for the long run with this plugin?
mm,
It doesn't really look like it looks like something, but if it doesn't really sound like something, then it feels like it's going to be more of a talking point than anything for social media, which doesn't last long.
yeah,
It looks
exactly.
like as well. I think this has appeared on my timeline, and the amount of YouTubers that I've seen here, it looks like no dissing. It looks like they've paid a lot of money for people to promote this, and the whole thing, in a lot of the thumbnails, is the look of it. It's the looks. It looks
Yeah, it
like
catches your eye.
it really does, and I think it's cool that people are now using that to their advantage. That's really cool, but is that really going to last?
Mm.
And like, does this make sense? Like, is
Yeah,
this
I mean,
really gonna?
yeah. I mean, it goes back to basically just to summarize. My point is, I feel like there there are there are people just making plugins that aren't actually doing anything new or exciting or innovative, but they have this really fancy UI that makes it feel like special and almost makes you feel like you want to buy it because of like the way it looks and the kind of, you know what I mean? It sort of like entices, it gets into that part of people's brains.
I think
Where it's
that's a
like,
bit.
you know what I mean? So I think that it's stuff like that that's a bit dodgy, and that kind of you do see it. Uh,
Well, I wasn't going to say dodgy, but now that you said it, I mean,
well, I don't
I,
mean
I,
when I say I don't. Yeah, I mean it's not like I don't think they're crooked.
yeah, no.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's shit. That's hit him right where it hurts. No, I get what you mean. I just think that, like I said, it's an audio plugin.
Hmm. It's a reverb plugin with some granular effect in it. You know,
That would
that's
take me
been
a day and a half. The visuals would take me a lot longer.
yeah. But the actual exactly that the actual thing, it's the actual under the box stuff. It's not super new, complex, or interesting, right?
If someone's doing it for the looks, then I mean,
Well, I don't think that they're doing it for the looks. I just think, well, you mean someone buying it for the looks? I don't think people are buying things for the looks or making them for the looks. I just think they're hiding a basic uninteresting effect and under a pretty um UI.
fair.
Yeah. And I just think that I just think like that is something that's going on at the moment.
I
And
hope it slows down because I think that if people get this expectation of it looks good, so it must cost a lot, I think that's going to really put a bit of a nail in the in a nail in the road there, a fork in the road there.
but in my opinion, it gives someone like you power to go, here, I've recreated Beam, but functionally.
I don't even need to create it. You could probably use Fruity Delay and some Valhalla Supermassive and some
Well,
really cool
I know.
modulation effects.
Well,
Do
I
you know what I
know
mean?
that.
So
Yeah,
my
yeah,
job's done. But I can see your point. I'm not trying to push you
yeah.
down, but I can completely see your point. I just don't. I think that's an area that I can't really comment on, and even just the visuals or just the whole thing behind it. I would never look at that plugin and go, "Oh, that looks really cool and interesting. I'm going to download that right now. £70. It looks cool."
Mm.
And even if it sounded pretty cool, I mean, I've never seen anyone use it.
No, I mean, no, I mean, it's fairly new as well. It's not, it came out this year,
That's
earlier this
fair.
year. But
That's
yeah, I mean,
fair.
it's again, I don't think I can't imagine it selling too well because it's not that interesting. Um, yeah. But
Interesting
no,
point, though. Yeah, totally.
yeah.
Sorry, not to just push it further off. It's an interesting point, definitely, but it's one that I won't be going down. I've definitely got some. I've got some graphic designers making some cool mobs for me, some cool backgrounds, some cool visuals. But this sort of graphic stuff, that's like really heavily leading towards it, I don't really see much point.
No. Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah. Um, I think we want to see what we want to see is more innovation and new things and new ideas, new ways of making sound, you know, rather than
Totally, and I hope plugin
rather just
developers
rather than just
see
like
this as like
yeah,
a
rather than just
sign.
repackaging what we already exists and making it look nice, I guess. Or even if you don't even make it look nice, just like we don't need another um another plugin, another. We don't need another compressor for the sakes of it or another reverb for the sakes of it. If you're going to make a reverb,
Yeah.
like a dedicated reverb plugin, I'd say you should do it because you've got this completely new technique or idea and that's going to actually make a difference, really.
But then
Um,
again, on another side of things as well, I made EB Morph, and that was advertised as an alternative for M Morph. I couldn't be bothered to pay however much it was for M Morph, so I built it myself and thought, fuck it, let's release it for free. So
yes.
in a sense, I can completely understand the kind of taking someone else's idea, not necessarily idea, but basic concept of delay, reverb, flanger, morph, that kind of stuff. It's a
Mm.
really basic effect under the hood. In all honesty, it just took a lot of working out. That kind of idea and funneling it into something else I can see, but then slapping on a nice visual for it and releasing it for 70 quid, you say, or
Mm.
something like that. It kind of just, it feels like it's not something I would do. And it's not something that I can see in the long run working out very well.
Yeah, and I guess
Um,
this is part of the conversation of like the future of stuff. Like, I'm wondering, is in general the younger generation particularly less interested in spending hundreds of pounds on plugins when they can get first of all they got Ableton or whatever that's got loads of stuff in it. I mean, really,
mm,
like Ableton is a really great example. It's got so many incredible devices and effects, and then if you include Max for Live, you don't actually need any third-party plugins at all.
nowhere near,
So it's
no
like,
chance.
so like, is there going to be a kind of a strong trend of young people growing up now who have come from a world where they're seeing much more things that are free, cheap, or they can quickly make something themselves? Is that going to be, I wonder if that is going to be a prominent trend that really does shake up the future of music software.
I don't know.
Mm.
But what I do know is that innovation is going to slowly and surely get more and more, is going to get pushed more and more to these big plugin developers. I'm not saying I'm innovative. I just released a break sampler for fuck's sake. There's a million of them. We don't need another one of them, but it's mine. So I love it. But there are definitely some areas of which, including spectral processing as well, like you mentioned earlier, that we just haven't dug deep enough into yet. There are some areas with just really weird stuff that, for example, um, the morph, for example, there was no real like free morph that I could see around, at least as far as I could see. And I feel like because it's such a basic effect, and anyone who programs or anyone that has ever seen inside of a morph plugin or understands how it works, you will know it's basic, especially just normal spectral morphing, let alone Kepstral. It is basic. It is rather simple in the long run. Um, that kind of thing for free just wasn't embedded, and wasn't for free openly available. Um, what's another one, for example? Like a spectral resonator. Ableton has its own spectral resonator. I haven't really seen a basic, almost like a default. You can open like Fruity Delay or something like a go-to default spectral resonator, something like that. Stuff like this as well. Like I just don't really see that often, and I hope there's like that little gap that we can sort of fill just to really fill everything in. Um, And there's plenty of stuff as well. Like I said, a lot of people are commenting and saying you should make this, and this. And realistically, looking at it, there are things that aren't free that sort of fit into these little gaps that aren't really filled in yet. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
But actually answering your question of like the innovation side of things, I think a lot of people are going to start. I'm glad you brought up the visuals for that as well. I think a lot of people are going to start looking at plugins more than actually listening to them. Minimeters, for example, it's a plugin that does nothing but help you visualize. I've seen it about 1 million TikToks now and 1 million Instagram reels. It costs a tenner. It's just a nice visual. If you're looking underneath a song, for example, and it's got Minimeters at the top, I can guarantee you within like 100 comments, if it's a popular video, one of them will be, what's that visualizer at the top? Or, haha, Minimeters at the top. But it's a visualizer plugin that, with all due respect, not many of us are going to look to. We've all got it inside of, like Span, that's completely free. That will do us, almost all of us. And yet we still want to spend stuff because it looks cool, because it's eye-catching. And I think a lot more people, especially my age, are going to look at plugins rather than listening to them, which is fair enough, completely. I do it a lot as well with even just films. I look at, you judge a book by its cover. It's natural, right? And I think plugins are going to kind of go down that route a bit more. But I don't know. I'm not really fussed. If people are going to download my plugins because they look cool, then okay, fair enough. That's awesome. But if they're going to use it and because it sounds cool, I've ticked a box. I've ticked a box for myself. That's what I aimed to do. Like with the Amen Break sampler, I ticked a box in making it sound interesting, not just look interesting.
Yes. Yeah.
And of course, different companies are going to have different ideas and going to want to work with visual artists and all that kind of stuff. So I get it. But for me right now, I'm just going to keep focusing on making it maybe look a little bit prettier, but still keeping it relatively cheap and sound good as possible.
Yeah. I mean, that is more important for sure.
And I think a lot of people would agree. Yeah.